Ooh, okay, so it's 1 o'clock. Well, 2 o'clock, sorry. My computer says 1 because, well, it's still on Central Time. Okay, good. Good afternoon. Very small room. So this is, so you want to work in Infosec. My name is Joey Maresca, Lost Knowledge. This is one of 2 presentations I'm doing this weekend. I think they wanted this one today because it's the more professional of the 2. Just a disclaimer, all views and opinions contained within this presentation are my own. They do not reflect the beliefs or opinions of my employer or any other affiliated organizations. I've been asked to do that every now and then, so I do it. Warning. Which one is this? Oh, yes. Educational, entertaining, interactive. I will ask you questions, and goddammit, please participate. Just a little bit about me. I'm a dork, a nerd. Love Star Wars, Star Trek, Legos. I'm an OVA hacker. Despite living in Tennessee now, I still very much associate with that group and owe a lot of where I'm at to them. I like cigars and bourbon. Who doesn't? So a little about my background, which kind of gets into why I did this talk. So I've been in information security for about 10 years now. I started out when I went to school for electrical and computer engineering, kind of wound up in security. I've done compliance, now I'm kind of primarily pen testing, but I've touched most of the major areas of information security at some point, just some far more than others. I have been a manager twice. I don't hate it. I just don't prefer to do it when I can avoid to. But because of this, I've interviewed a lot of interesting people and lots of people who want to work in cyber. And I will be using the word cyber a few times. I apologize now. So why did I do this talk? As I kind of alluded to, I used to live in the DC metro area. And there were a lot of commercials like this that I'm about to play for you all. And I'll try to put this mic down here so you can hopefully hear it on the recording. Oh, great.
Someone has to stop the bad guys.
Cyber is where the jobs are.
Secure your future. A degree in cybersecurity from the University of Maryland University College can help. Our nationally recognized cybersecurity programs are taught by experts using real-world training, so you'll have the skills for both government and private sector career opportunities. Visit umuc.edu/cyber. That's umuc.edu/cyber.
That was in no way, shape, or form an endorsement for UMUC. As a matter of fact, it's the exact opposite. I interviewed, when I was in Northern Virginia, probably close to a couple dozen people from UMUC with cyber degrees. Most of them couldn't even tell me what the topology of a normal network was. They sure as hell couldn't name like the standard 5 layers, screw the OSI model. Application and session are not layers. The normal 5 layers of the internet, they couldn't name any of it. And if you can't defend a damn network if you don't know the difference between application and network and data link. I don't care what anybody says. It's not that hard to learn. I swear to you, it's not that hard. But if you don't understand those differences, you don't understand the difference between a router, a switch, a firewall. So without having that basic knowledge, you can't defend a network. And what most schools like this that are doing cybersecurity degrees are doing is they're pushing out policy junkies. And if that's what you need, which is great in the federal government, well, it's not great in the federal government. They have a lot of policy junkies. They just don't have a lot of implementers.
They're called officers.
Yeah, well, yes, in the military they are usually called officers. I always worked civilian, so it was government versus contractor. Hold on, I've lost my mouse. Go. Okay. So more about why I did this talk. So there's a lot of headlines. Actually these 2 are both relatively recent from when I put the slides together. We've been hearing probably now for a couple years about the shortage of staffing in the field. There's too many jobs and not enough people. The new one that probably within the last month or so has been everyone's security fatigue. Excuse me. This other one's my meme of my own creation that nobody but I ever laugh at because I'm apparently the only person in the hacking community who's actually seen The Music Man. Sigh. Okay, so my hypothesis, why I did all this. So a lot of people entering the field for the wrong reasons. College ads like that one that I showed. There's another good one for some Florida university. Go search, like if you've never done it, go search for cyber degree on YouTube. Oh, it's fun. A lot of people who get into it don't understand the scope of the work that they're getting into. And also I hate the idea of a cybersecurity degree because the field encompasses so much that it's not really like one degree field, right? There are certain parts of the field that could be whole degrees. There are other parts of the field that really aren't. As much as I would like to think otherwise, pen testing is definitely not one of those that is a degree field. We are in a tech or security bubble. Again, I don't care what anybody else says. These numbers are a little old because I didn't update them this week, but I mean, seriously, if you go look, I'm pretty sure FireEye is still in the low teens, if it's still in the teens at all. Dell SecureWorks has basically been a total flop since the day it IPO'd. We all know the Norse Core story, which honestly, like when I made the slide, I couldn't actually remember their name. That's how like much they faded from my memory, and all I did was Google pew pew map, and bam, there was Norse. Was the first shot. That's kind of scary. And then there's this other thing down here that I want to point out, which is that there are parts of the industry that are commoditized or that are heading there. And so that's, I think, bad for the fringe. But if you fit well in the niche, I don't think it's going to impact you as much. So those are my hypotheses. So what is cyber security? So that's just some of it. GRC, SecOps, security engineering, malware and hunt, IR, pen testing, many other things. And so that goes back to my point about a cybersecurity degree, is they pretty much don't cover any of this. Like, don't get me wrong, there are, and there's entire groups now that have degrees that are basically forensics and IR, right? I mean, that's a whole field. Forensics in and of itself is a whole field. And IR falls heavily into that. Security engineering, I mean, it's almost just, at this point, just an extension of the old, like, network engineers, just with different hardware. So, in governance, risk, and compliance, that's where your cybersecurity degree should be. So we're going to do some unscientific polling, because I did an unscientific poll. So my first question is, oh man, that's tiny, is how long have you worked in information security? So I'm just going to start off with, like, how many have been working in it for, like, 0? How many have not started in the field yet and are trying to get into it? Okay. How many at least, like, 5 years? Okay. 0 to 5. 0 to 5, okay. 5 to 10. Okay, I'm kind of at the edge there. 10 to 15. Okay. Anyone in the room over 20 years experience in the field? Okay. Some people like to joke, they're like, the field didn't exist 20 years ago. I'm like, yes, it did. We just didn't call it what it's called today. I had one person on the survey, and I think I have this on my notes. Let's see. Wait. Damn, mouse keeps moving. No, make back. Okay. Yeah, so I had minimum 1 year on my survey. The average was about 11. The max was 40. I'm pretty certain I could guess who the 40 was, just based on the people I know who follow me and who did the survey. I don't know that many old people. No offense to any old people in the room or watching. So, what's the highest level of education that you've completed? So how many people in here just are in the field and have nothing beyond a high school education? Like no college whatsoever? Okay. How many have at least some college or an associate's degree? Well, they used to count themselves as a college. Bachelor's degrees? Anyone besides me? Okay. So here's going to come the fun second part of this question. How many with bachelor's degrees actually have a bachelor's degree that's something information security related? Anyone? Yeah. Kinda, yeah. I mean, so one of my specializations in electrical and computer engineering was computer communications and networks. So it's very kind of edge. I mean, I understand it to a far different level, which is also probably why I wish more people understood what the data link layer was. No, seriously, it's so everyone always thinks about things that like from layer 3 up. Nobody ever thinks of layer 3 down, like layer 2 and 1. As a double E, I took 2 courses in the field. One was computer science, which was all layer 5 application, and 2 classes in double E. One was data link, and one was bordering on physical layer. I like that stuff. What can I say? I'm broken. So it's all pretty interesting distribution of the degrees. I was kind of surprised at the higher number of graduate degrees. I'd really like to talk to those people to find out how many of those are actually information security related. Is it related to what you do? Didn't actually get I guess, a plurality of yes. But, I mean, almost a third of the people who responded said it had no relation whatsoever to what they do. So that kind of matched what I expected. Question 3, and I forgot to break this slide out. So this was kind of the areas. It was a fairly even distribution, I'd say. I do think this list showed that I do not know a lot of IR folks. Either that or there just aren't a lot of IR folks. Okay. I do pen testing. I've done IR as part of my current job. I've done security research as part of my current job. I've done architecting as part of my current job. There was a period where our SOC manager joked I was the best incident responder she had, which I guess means I worked ops. And I don't do any GRC now because I'd rather die in a fire. No offense, some people love GRC. That's what they're good at. I can't stand policies because most of them are pretty stupid. I was looking at 2 the other day that relate to where I work, PCI and high trust. And if you don't know what high trust is, it's a medical one that makes shit ridiculous. So both of them still recommend 90-day password reset cycles, and anyone who's paid any attention to the last, 5 years of research on the topic knows that 90-day reset cycles just leads to shittier passwords. So, and every password audit I've done in the last year since I've been in my current job pretty much holds that to bear. I'd also like to point out I know for a fact there are a great many government agencies where 180 is the norm, and they just enforce a really strict password policy that's like 14 characters or something ridiculous. So, yeah. The full survey is here if anybody would actually still like to go complete it. Sometime over the next, couple months. It gets slow around the holidays. I will go through and actually try to publish some of the results and some of the findings in depth, and try to correlate it to my original theory, and hypothesis. But here's why I believe I'm still right, despite what the survey tries to tell me. So the survey tried to tell me that a lot of people didn't get into this field for money. And let me explain why I feel like they're getting into it for the wrong reason. I went to school in the early 2000s, graduated from Ohio State in 2004. As I said, I was an ECE major. And because of the computer part, I took a lot of CIS classes. With a lot of people who openly admitted they were getting into programming because they saw money in it. Remember, this is when the .com bubble was booming. This was just before it burst. So people were all trying to get into that field as a means to make money, and most of them couldn't code their way out of a wet paper sack. I'd been coding by that point for at least 8 years, I think. So I knew I didn't want to program, so I saw that, and I feel like I'm seeing as a very similar trend here in our field industry now, because you see commercials like that push jobs are in cyber, the jobs are in cyber. People are like, oh, there's work there, there's money there. I mean, think about it. Security keeps getting bigger and bigger budgets, right? Some departments are getting slashed, while security seems to keep growing somehow. So, Javad Malik put out this tweet. Was this probably about a month ago now, almost a month and a half. This was a public post on LinkedIn where somebody said, hey, I'm trying to create a WhatsApp group for SOC analysts to be able to chat and communicate. Send me a PM with your phone numbers. These idiots here put their phone numbers into a public post that anybody on LinkedIn can see. Public post. So if anybody wants to go find this, there's some great material there for your next penetration test, phishing exercise. And then I see a lot of other stupid stuff. There was a tweet, and I tried to find it and add in here, and I couldn't find it. And it was a conversation. The guy's Twitter profile claims to be like a security analyst, a security guy, and he was asking why it was important that passwords are salted, and the salt is different. And I was just like, you, sir, should find another field. So we're going to go into a little bit about perceptions, expectations, realities. So my life as a penetration tester or hacker, what my friends think that I do, they think I do nothing but play games all day. I do think my mom thinks I'm still work for Geek Squad or something. What the media thinks I do, what apparently Donald Trump thinks I do, what I think I do, popping shells all day. What I really do, spend about 2/3 of my day writing reports. I guess that's just the statement to my field. So perceptions. So we're going to get into interactive again. What kind of perceptions do you see? I mean, you kind of saw the ones I saw that my friends and family saw of me. But I mean, what do you guys see? How much understanding do the people you interact with regularly understand what it is you do? Zero. Pretty much not at all, right? Yeah. And if they talk to us on a regular basis and they don't know, how the hell is anybody else who's actually not tied to us going to know? Yeah, exactly. And so that's the same thing, right? How do external groups and media see us? How do educational people look at it, right? And I think that's a big question, right? Because there's still very minimal impact and education at all for this field, formal education. We still have a lot of certifications. We're a very cert-friendly field. That's an extension of IT. I just know it. But there's not a lot of degree programs let me rephrase. There's a lot of degree programs for cybersecurity that are total BS. What there's not is a lot of good formal training, right? We don't need a full degree for most of information security, but most colleges don't even have a class or two on the topic. And schools that still offer information, like MIS for some of them call it IS, Business Information Systems. The thing has every degree except for computer in the name. Most of those people don't even have a mandatory security class, right? So just even a basic intro to here is what security is and why it's important to care. Because the reality is IT's main focus is always on availability, not security. That's why security people have jobs. So my personal perceptions. There are a lot of new Infosec jobs. They seem to rotate by cycle depending on who's being breached that week. I work in the medical field right now. So we're booming right now. I'd like to thank Anthem and Care First for getting breached. Thanks to you guys, I'm secure in my job for a long time. There's a lot of underqualified candidates. This goes back to my people with cybersecurity degrees, HR departments that don't understand how to filter. In my area in particular, in Nashville, a lot of the stuff we get is networking people. Some of them want to get into security. Some of them, job titles have just become so bastardized down there. People who see money. Don't get me wrong, like I said, there's money in the field. But like I've also said, it's becoming commoditized. External pen tests, with the exception of maybe a few small companies that have good, strong customer bases that understand what it really is. I mean, the reality is, this argument comes up probably every other year at hacker conferences. The pen test puppy mills, they are a thing, and there's no competing, right? It's a race to the bottom, and that's exactly what a commodity is. I do believe there's a community that respects the field, and so this is why I think my survey responses didn't come back the way I expected them to. The reality is the people who follow me and who follow them are in this community, so they're not the type of people who are going to answer that survey and tell me, yeah, we were in it for the money. The people who are going to do that probably have never been to one of these conferences, probably never will be, You probably know some of them. You might work with a few of them. I do think people are getting security exhaustion. I have a whole other talk idea related to this about how people just don't care about security, and that's actually a bigger risk to our field than anything else. But that is for another time, because trust me, that's a whole hour talk in and of itself. So, what is interception, right? Headlines are sometimes all that an executive sees, right? They get home and they put on CNN or MSNBC or Fox News or whatever politically leaning news network they like to watch, and they see the headlines, the 5-second sound bites, and that's pretty much their only input into what they see when it comes to security, right? So then they show up at work and they're like, "Ah, the Russians are coming, the Russians are coming." So these same things can influence, the normal user, right? I mean, most of them are probably just going to hear what they see in 5 seconds, on the internet, unless you're actually pushing them some sort of regular statements internally. And again, reiterating this point, one of the greatest risks to our fields is the perception. Do people care if their data is safe? I work in information security, and at this point, I'm sick and tired of it. I assume everyone has my damn shit. I pretty much have lifetime credit monitoring at this point because of every breach that my data's been involved in. Between OPM, Care First, Anthem, Home Depot, Target. Let me see, what else was my data probably sitting in? Yeah, at least those 5. Probably more. Do people pay attention to breaches? So another core argument of my other post is the reality is no, they don't. In the history of the large data breaches, if you go looking through the large data breaches, only one company no longer exists, and that company was a card processor. And all the credit card companies said, "Well, fuck you, we're not using you anymore." And when you've only got 5 customers, and they all say, "We're out," you're done. Target, not even a blip on the stock. Home Depot, same thing. TJ Maxx, same thing. So all these companies, it's a risk-reward thing, right? How much is it going to cost them in the end? A couple grand for to pay for your year of credit monitoring. I once joked that maybe all the breaches is actually just a scheme by the credit monitoring firms they'll hack the people, breach the data, so that then those companies have to come to the credit monitorings and buy large contracts to pay for individual people to have credit monitoring. I think it's a great scheme, and if a credit monitoring service hasn't done that yet, you know what? Somebody there's not thinking. I'm sure they are. So expectations. Some more interactive time. Yay! So those of you who haven't done anything in the security field, what are your expectations? Huh? What do you think you're getting yourself into? A lot of pain.
Crying at nighttime.
Pain and crying at nighttime. I don't think I've openly wept yet, but I do shake my head. Yeah. So what kind of expectations did other people have before they got into this field? I mean, I know some people... Unicorns? Yeah, unicorns. I know some people were thrust into this field. They're like, I was a network admin for 10 years. And they're like, hey, Bob, can you go over here and do security? Okay. And they had no clue what they were getting into. So some people had zero expectation. I fully am aware of that. For me, I don't know what the hell I remember thinking. My first one, I'd been working at the patent office for 8 months. That wasn't going so well. Talk about a dull job. So dull, I'd rather go do risk and compliance. So went and started working for a FIPS validation lab. I won't get into what FIPS is. I have done a talk on it. By all means, go Google it. I think I got into that job not quite sure what to expect, and spent a lot of my time trying not to be, I won't say not trying to be bored. I actually enjoyed it for a long while. Then companies got bought, and that kind of ruined things for me. I guess what I'll say is, from a pen testing perspective, I always thought it would be a little cooler than I've typically found it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've done some cool shit, but there's a lot of boring stuff in between.
Reporting sucks.
Yes, reporting does suck. It is the worst, and by the way, if you are working to become a pen tester, let me give you a pro tip right now. Make sure, well, no. Don't worry. Don't worry if somebody's going to read it or not, because odds are, yes, they're probably not going to read it. Some people will. Never make report writing. Never have report writing start on a Monday. Nothing makes a Monday shittier than realizing you have to start writing a report. Just putting that out there. So yeah, there you go. So when I first started in Infosec, it wasn't in the news every day. It wasn't. I mean, 10 years ago, would we maybe hear an information security story once a day? I mean, once a month, once a year. I mean, now it's like every other day somebody got breached, or the Russians are hacking this, or, fucking 400-pound hackers, yes, which I qualify as, so it kind of makes me sad. I feel like Trump should hire me because I am the 400-pound hacker, so hire me. I'll be the cyber czar, if that's a thing. I think all the titles will have czars underneath them, won't they? Oh, sorry. Conferences have become an outlet of sort for me. Most of my talks become very preachy and bitchy. If I didn't get stuff out, if I didn't swear, if I didn't let my frustration out, I'd probably be dead. I did become focused on wanting to do pen tests. The first conference I ever attended was, I guess it was DEF CON. Don't ever do that. If you're watching at home and you've never attended a conference, do not make DEF CON your first conference. The first one where I actually think I gained anything from it was Carolina Con. I can't remember what year that was now. About 5 or 6 years ago, probably. Definitely became an outlet, but, I started seeing and hearing more about pen testing and the work people were doing. It sounded fun, it sounded exciting, and then I started writing reports. Yay. What are my expectations moving forward? So this is the sad state of affairs, I guess, of my future life. Part of the reason I took my current job was for the first bullet up there. I fully intend to kind of grow and build a team right now. I am hiring junior pen testers. You do have to live or be willing to move to Nashville, Tennessee. Trust me, it's a great place to live. I do selective mentoring. I'll explain why selective. I got into an argument one day on Twitter with somebody we'll call a kid, who was arguing with me about how Linux worked. Particularly about how one distribution worked. And into the argument for about 30 minutes of back and forth tweets, I read his profile and realized that I had been using Linux since before he was born, at which point I just kind of walked away when I realized that I was getting zero respect. For anybody looking to get into the field, show some damn respect for the people who got here first. Trust me. It'd be worth your while. Management, most of the time I don't hate it. The reality is we can have more influence from above than we can from below, at least in most organizations. So I really do believe at some point I will be much higher than I currently am within organizations. The realities, oh yay, life. There's a lot of fun, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of fun in security. A lot of people enjoy their jobs. There's a lot of cool things that happen. There's a lot of cool stuff you get to do. I've got like 2 years of work I can't talk about. It's fun. There's conferences, which are lots of fun. This is just some of the ones I go to. Just B-sides in general. SCADA-Con, ShmooCon, DerbyCon, Carolina Con. If you really don't mind a million people, there's DEF CON. DEF CON is kind of, I do like this analogy. Black Hat is what RSA Conference used to be. DEF CON is what Black Hat used to be. Some people have tried to claim that Derby is what DEF CON used to be.
Probably still a little more family friendly.
A little more family friendly. I would say Carolina Con is probably a little bit closer to that, just because it's a little bit more hackerish and mentality. And for those who are wondering what the hell is RSA Conference, it is basically the E3 or CES of our industry now. Please do not waste your time. It's basically keynotes and product demos. So it's great. If you want to go see 1,000 product demos, go buy. It used to be like $200 for like the Expo Pass. You could just go walk in all the booths. So if you want to look at 1,000 products at once, it's good for that. If you're on the West Coast, otherwise it's not worth the time. And like I said, many more. Yeah, that's the other thing too. If you know a vendor, you can usually get a couple free passes. They usually have them. There's even more work. There's meetings, there's reports. Trainings can be fun, but they can also be dull as can be, depending on what kind of training you're doing. Research, a lot of head banging off the keyboard. So I'm a little quick to my closing. I didn't get as many questions this time as I did last time. So a couple of thanks, as always, to the conference presenters for letting me speak and putting up with my crap. Survey takers. God, Spaceballs is on. Does everybody just want to leave and go watch Spaceballs? To all the people who took the survey, so I will take a bunch of questions. I have a ton of time because last time I gave this talk, I went a little slower and more people in the room, so I was able to get out some more questions. But does anybody have any questions for me as far as, what I presented or just any general questions? I mean, I'm here. I have time. We have space we can fill. I can stare at the camera.
Part of this was in and out and so forth.
Uh-huh.
Can you talk anything about degree programs? What do you think of people getting college degrees? What they should?
So Adrian apparently missed the first half of the conversation. It
happens a lot.
What do you see out there? I mean, I'm sitting here with my son. He's high school senior.
Mm-hmm.
Thinks he wants to go into Infosec.
Okay.
I'm trying to talk him out of it, so I bring him here. and he goes back up the room and says, "Oh, that's kind of cool." So I'm not doing too good.
So, I guess the first thing, right? So if you have somebody who's wanting to get into the field, somebody who's in high school, what would I tell them to do? From an educational perspective, it seems like at this point that most companies have a college degree as a barrier to entry. So here's what I'll say. If the degree says cybersecurity, just run the other direction. Then decide what it is.
What good ones are out there?
So you can look for field-specific things. I know that Marshall has a digital forensics program. You can look for the best people I've had that I've hired. Yes, it's a little biased too. We're all engineers. Engineers, and ironically, I know a lot of theater majors in the degree. But for practicality's sake and your parents' sanity, don't go get a theater degree.
Thank you.
So, no, engineering, any of them would really be good except civil. I won't rail on civil engineers too much. Try not to, at least. When I was doing hiring, the best candidates I always seemed to have were always engineers. You have to remember that 2/3 of engineering is problem solving. And so that in and of itself basically teaches a good base of skills. Most of the stuff in this field you can be taught. 2/3 of it is training and certifications. Find a school that has a CCDC program if you want to get into the defense side. Not everyone has a CCDC team. I can't remember what CCDC stands for, but if you don't know what it is, it's basically collegiate level competition. Yeah, kind of. Well, it's a little different because all the students are basically all defense, and all the offense is professionals, including some very evil people. And if he's watching this, Rob, I'm talking about you. Look for something like that. If nothing else, even if you want to go into pen testing or something else, it's a good base to be able to be in with an organization that's security-minded people, learning things, getting involved. And a lot of those teams are, a lot of those teams are doing other kind of extracurriculars together and learning a lot of, good skills and abilities. Start looking at training. If you can somehow either squeeze money together from a part-time job or beg your parents to do trainings, do it. There's plenty of options that are relatively affordable. I'll shill for DerbyCon all day. I mean, $1,000 for a 2-day training class that is almost the same quality you're going to get at any of the conferences that are going to charge you $6,000. It's worth it. Yep.
Tip that I heard at a conference I went to a couple weeks ago was also, if you can't afford the training or the conference, volunteer at the training or conference, and then you get to sit for a lot of it for free. So maybe not necessarily get the certificate right away for some of the trainings, but if you volunteer enough, they'll eventually give you a certificate for all the time you sit through.
So, but yeah, I mean, and it's something to be very proactive with. I think most people, if they want to pick up skills, you're going to get far more doing, looking for either training courses or doing kind of hands-on, like creating your own home lab, doing those sorts of things. To my knowledge, there are not a lot of degree programs that cover much of anything about security, at least not the practical hands-on side. If you want to go do GRC, go get a cybersecurity degree, because they will cover policies and enforcing policies and setting policies to your, blue in the face. Yeah, basically. Make sure. So.
You have to know the government side of it, but that's not where we all want to live.
No. The other thing is, so the other reason engineers make good people, and I guess probably some theater majors to the same extent, is writing ability. I don't care what part you go into of information security, you're going to be writing a lot. You're going to be doing reports for pen tests. If you're doing incident response, you're going to be writing incident reports. You're going to be doing, if you're doing research, then God, you're going to probably be writing academic papers. So no matter what area you go into, you're going to be doing some level of writing. And so again, the one thing I remember, the difference between the CIS people I knew and the engineers were taking minimum, I think, 5 writing classes compared to the, 2, I think the CIS majors were taking back then. So, and those were all English, so it was all like English 101. And you're not learning how to tech write. Stop it. Because I had a technical writing course, and I had my senior design project. So both of those required me to write. If you're not good with communicating with people and face-to-face situations, work on that. That is another skill that you have to get. Thankfully, right now, my boss keeps me out of a lot of meetings. Don't get me wrong. I'll go to meetings if I'm asked to. But if I'm marked as optional, guess who ain't showing up? Any other questions? Anything else? Okay. There's my contact info. Like I said, I got done a little quicker than usual. There's my Twitter handle. There's one of my personal emails. You can always come buy me a drink. I'll never turn one down. And like I said, I'm looking. So if anyone here is hiring and willing to live in the greater Nashville metro area, I can sell you on it all day. So right now I work for a company called Premise Health. So I work in healthcare. And I will say there's a lot of jobs down there too. So if anybody is looking for a place that does have a relatively rich market with a relatively shallow candidate pool, and I mean that very sincerely.
Yeah. I used to work a few years ago, Tom Data Fleet Corps.
Okay.
Aaron Brown.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's tons.
All those people. They're actually pretty good
Yeah.
people. They got crappy companies.
Yeah. So, there's tons of companies. There's healthcare galore. There's 3 hospital systems. My company, at least one insurance company, maybe actually I think 2. There's at least 3 major restaurant chains that are based in the greater Nashville metro area. Nissan's U.S. headquarters are there, though I don't know how much of their security folks are actually U.S. based versus over on the other side of, the ocean. What What else is down there? Bridgestone, Dollar General. There's a ton. Trust me. Like, when I started looking, I was like, God, am I going to have a hard time if for some reason my job disappeared, finding another job? And the answer was no. I went back to Virginia and had dinner one night with a bunch of the Nova Hackers guys, and I said to them, I was like, even some of the worst people in our group could come out next week and they'd have jobs. I was like, there's just not the depth of talent. And there's really not. Particularly in healthcare, where it's boomed ever since the breaches, there's just not the depth of knowledge and skill to be able to fill that void. But yeah. So, nobody has anything else? I'll spare you from having to hear my voice anymore until tomorrow at 11 a.m.
Thank you.